You know that feeling, right? You're stuck staring down a massive decision, and there's just no clear winner. Well, here's the truth. The perfect choice almost never exists. So, how do you pick the best possible option when every single choice involves some kind of trade-off? That's exactly what we're going to break down today.
I mean, think about it. You're choosing a new job. Are you going for the highest salary, the best work-life balance, or the shortest commute? Chances are you can't get the absolute best of all three. And it's the same story when you're buying a car or picking an apartment. You're constantly juggling these competing factors, just trying to find the right balance.
Well, it turns out this exact problem has a name in the world of business and science. It's called multi-criteria decision-making, and it's an entire field dedicated to untangling these messy choices with structured, logical methods. So today, we're going to look at how the pros do it, and we'll break down two of their most powerful techniques.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why perfect is actually the enemy of making a good decision. Then we'll dive into a method called goal programming. It's all about juggling priorities. After that, we'll check out something called AHP, which basically turns any choice into a head-to-head tournament. Then we'll figure out which tool to use when, and we'll wrap it all up with the one key takeaway for making smarter trade-offs in your own life.
So here's the fundamental problem. In pretty much any complex real-world situation, you just can't have it all. You can't find a car that's the cheapest, the fastest, the safest, and the most fuel-efficient. It just doesn't exist. A great decision isn't about finding some mythical, perfect option. It's about making the best, most informed trade-offs you possibly can.
And here's the formal definition. It's all about making choices when you've got multiple and often conflicting goals. The key idea here isn't to find the one single right answer. Nope. It's about having a logical framework to find the most satisfactory answer based on what you decide is most important. Okay, so let's get into our first technique. It's called goal programming. This method is absolutely perfect for those times when you have a list of goals ranked by importance, and you're just trying to get as close as you can to hitting all of them, knowing that hitting them all perfectly is probably impossible. So to see how this works, let's meet the Beaver Creek Pottery Company. They make two things: bowls and mugs. And as you can see, each one takes a certain amount of labor and clay and brings in a certain amount of profit. Now, the classic business problem is, how many of each should they make to get the most profit, right? Well, it's a little more complicated than that. You see, Beaver Creek doesn't just have one goal, they have four, and they've ranked them. Their absolute top priority is to avoid layoffs, so they want to use at least 40 hours of labor. After that, they want to hit a profit target. Then they have a limit on how much clay they can use. And finally, their lowest priority is to keep costly overtime to a minimum. Do you see how these goals can actually fight each other? Using more labor to avoid layoffs might just push them right into overtime.
Okay, so how on earth does the math handle this? It uses something called deviational variables. Now, that sounds super complex, but the idea is actually really simple. For each goal, the model just tracks two numbers: how much you undershot the goal, that's D minus, and how much you overshot it, that's D plus. The entire point of goal programming is just to make those misses as small as possible, in the order of your ranked priorities. And this quote right here really reveals the whole philosophy. Goal programming is all about embracing imperfection. It isn't trying to find some fantasy optimal solution. Instead, its job is to find the most satisfactory one, the outcome that gets as close as possible to what you want, even if it can't nail every single target perfectly. So after running the model, boom, Beaver Creek gets its answer. The most satisfactory plan is to make 15 bowls and 20 mugs. This exact mix is the one that best navigates their four conflicting priorities. It hits the most important ones as best it can, then moves on to the next. It gives them a clear, data-driven, actionable plan. All right, now for our second tool, the Analytical Hierarchy Process, or AHP. This is for a totally different kind of problem. Instead of figuring out how to use your resources, this is for when you have a fixed set of options and you've got to pick the single best one. The genius of AHP is how it turns a totally overwhelming choice into a series of simple one-on-one matchups. It's like a decision tournament. So, for this example, imagine a company called South Corp is trying to decide where to build a new shopping mall. They've narrowed it down to 3 cities: Atlanta, Birmingham, and Charlotte. And they're going to judge them based on 4 key things: the size of the customer market, the local income level, the city's infrastructure, and the transportation option. So, AHP works in 3 main steps. First, you lay the problem out as a hierarchy. Your main goal is at the top, your criteria are in the middle, and your choices are at the bottom.
Then, this is where the magic happens. You make a bunch of pairwise comparisons. You don't try to compare all 3 cities at once. You just ask simple questions like, on customer market alone, is Atlanta better than Birmingham? That's it. It's a tournament.
And this right here is the secret sauce of AHP. Our brains are actually pretty bad at juggling 7 different variables at once, but we're surprisingly good at comparing just 2 things head-to-head. So for each matchup, the decision maker just uses a simple 1 to 9 scale to say how much more they prefer one option over the other, just for that one specific criterion. You do this head-to-head comparison for every possible pair, across every single one of your criteria. This process creates a preference matrix, like you see here for just the customer market. And what's really important is you also do this for the criteria themselves. You compare them against each other to figure out which factors, like market size or infrastructure, matter most in the final decision. And this is the payoff. This chart shows the power of the whole method. After the math takes all those simple one-on-one judgments and puts them all together, it spits out a final weighted score for each city. And in this case, even though Atlanta might have seemed like a strong contender, Charlotte comes out as the clear winner with a score of over 0.53. Okay, so we have 2 incredibly powerful but very different ways to make complex decisions. And the obvious question is, how in the world do you know which one to use for your problem?
Well, here's the crucial difference. Think of it like this. You use goal programming for resource allocation problems, things like budgets, production schedules, or staffing plans where you have numerical targets you need to get close to. And you use AHP when you have to pick one option from a list, like choosing a job, a vendor, or in our case, a location, based on a mix of factors that can be both hard numbers and subjective feeling.
So let's wrap this all up. Let's really distill this down to the single most important lesson from both of these amazing techniques. The big idea behind both goal programming and AHP is really the same. You're taking that messy, confusing decision out of your head and putting it into a structured framework. You are forced to clearly define your goals, to actually weigh your priorities, and to evaluate your options logically. It replaces a vague gut feeling with a clear, defensible process. And so I'll leave you with this question. Think about the last big choice you had to make. Did you consciously lay out all the conflicting goals? Did you systematically compare your options against each other? By using this kind of structured thinking, even just informally, we can all start to shine a light on the hidden trade-offs we make every single day and start making much better, smarter choices.